In this tutorial, we will begin to explore some ways to work with the video frame timeline as another way to construct moving images. To get started, we're going to start with a custom size 720 by 720 by 72 pixels. I have it in my most recent. If you don't, you might have to type this in, 720 by 720 by 72 pixels. I'm going to make my background white. And then I'm going to make sure that my timeline is checked and that it is on video, create video timeline. To get started, you're going to make a new layer and it should have a transparent background. Then you're going to go to the marquee tool, which is the rectangle marquee tool, and you're going to create a black box with that. You're going to hold down your shift key and then drag to the right, and you will see that you have these arching ants. And this is your selection. We're going to fill this with black. To do that, you're going to go to Edit, Fill, and then you have several options here, but we're going to fill it with black, so you can click black and click OK. And then you're going to deselect it by just clicking anywhere off the page, and this is going to be your square that you're going to rotate. You want to make sure that you have your object on a separate layer, so make sure that you have a background and a layer 1. Next, I'm going to move this layer into the video timeline. So to do that, the first thing we have to do is go to Window and pull up the timeline, and we see kind of the same dialog box that we worked with in our last animation. This time, we're going to select Create Video Timeline instead of Create Frame Animation. To do that, we want to select the layer and then just click Video Timeline. You'll see that there's a video track that appears in the timeline, and this is measured by frames per second. If you look up here above your track, you'll see that there are a series of numbers, and these are your frames, 10 frame, 20 frame, and then this is 1 second. If I drag the slider over, this is just going to increase the way that I can view the frame rate, so I can see all the frames. It's not compressed. So I can now see that this is 0, 0, that's my first frame, 01, 02, 03, and so on and so forth. This goes all the way up to 30 frames per second. That is the standard default for Photoshop, which is a lot of frames to create for 1 second animation. So we're going to change that. Typically 24 is used for animation. We're going to go under this fly out menu and select Set Timeline Frame Rate and make it to 10 just to simplify things. So on both boxes should have 10, and then you're going to click OK. You can see in the number range now that we have 10 frames per 1 second instead of 30, because it goes from 0 to 10. So by default, Photoshop puts a total of 5 seconds whenever you are transferring a layer to the video timeline. You can shorten that anytime you want by just clicking on the very edge and dragging it over. So we can shorten it to 4 seconds if we'd like. So this is basically how the timeline works in terms of frames and duration. So again, I want to reiterate, the timeline is based on a series of frames over a period of time, which is a duration of time. Next, you can view your video layer larger if you want. Sometimes I like to do that. If I go to my flyout panel, I can set panel options, and here I can click on the larger thumbnail size, and this will give me a larger viewing. What comes up kind of in the very beginning is a kind of small icon. So this is an indicator that this is the image that's on your layer. This is your playhead, and your playhead basically scrubs through your layer from frame to frame and shows where you are in the time frame itself. So if you put your playhead at 9 frames, that is what you will be viewing exactly at 9 frames. Whatever you have at the 9th frame will appear. Over here, this is your playback options. If you click on your solid triangle, the playhead will scrub through your video layer. If you click on the triangle to the right, it will play forward 1 frame, and if you click on the triangle to the left, it'll play back 1 frame. This is important because you'll be using this playback 1 frame and 2 frames at a time. Okay, down here, this is the indicator that this is your layer, and if you click on this little triangle to the left, you will get a series of keyframe options, which we're going to go over next. So you can control your position, your opacity, and your style. I also want to be able to set transformation, and in order to do that, I have to change this layer into a smart object. So I'm going to come back and click on my layer and then go under Layer, Smart Objects, Convert to Smart Object. When I do that, a little square will be here on the right, and it's basically telling me that this is a smart object. And if you can see, once I've made this a smart object and I click on this layer, I now have something called Transform. So I have access to these transform tools that we use in our last project. So that's kind of an overview of the video frame dialog box. And next I'm going to show you how to set keyframes to move this box through the space.